Well, welcome everyone to this webinar introducing the LOTI model. Delighted that so many of you are here with us today, interested in the work of the London Office of Technology and Innovation. We hope by the end of this session, you'll leave feeling really knowledgeable about what we do and whether it might be useful for your world. The reason we've held this webinar is that we've heard from central government colleagues, from people all around the UK and indeed far beyond, that there's an uptick in interest in the LOTI model. And so we really wanted to make sure that if people outside of LOTI are talking about LOTI, let's at least make sure you're fully equipped with the details of what we are, how and why we were set up, how we've evolved over the 5.5, almost 6 years that we've been in action, our funding and governance arrangements, what we focus on, some example projects to bring it to life and make it really tangible. We'll share some lessons learnt, including if we were to start again or what we'd advise any other part of the country interested in this model. And of course, in part, we don't necessarily know what you don't know, and therefore there'll be plenty of chance for you to ask your questions of us, and if we haven't covered it during the course of the presentation. If you've just joined, just a reminder, feel free to pop questions in the chat, but we'll come to those at the end. So please save your questions for the end, and we'll cover them there. Without further ado, let's dive in. Right, what is the LOTI model? Well, LOTI, the way we describe it is that we are London local government's collaborative innovation community. And I really want to emphasize that last word there, community. We tend not to talk very much about the LOTI team, a team of just 10 people. We tend to say, like, this is effective because it's about getting our colleagues right across London local government working together on innovation, data and tech to do things as a community. That is what is so powerful about it. It's important to understand that we are a membership organisation. Our members are London boroughs, the Greater London Authority as London Strategic Authority, and London councils. And if you're less familiar with London councils, they represent the London boroughs and the City of London on a whole host of different policy and service areas, represent them with central government and help them work together. They also host LOTI. In terms of what we work on, we help our members, those boroughs, the GLA, London councils, we help them work together using innovation, data and technology so they can be really high performing organisations, improve public services and tackle some of London's biggest challenges. Note there, folks, I think one of the biggest misunderstandings about LOTI is that we're just the tech people. We're not. We are interested in what we call the full 21st century toolkit of innovation, data and technology methods, which are more needed than ever. And finally, really worth emphasising that we are part of London local government. We're not consultants. We're not an external agency. We are structurally part of London local government. And the benefit of that is that we are in the conversations where London leaders and colleagues are talking about their pressures, their challenges. We're not trying to sell anything. And we're also there for the long haul. We won't disappear after each individual project. So institutionally, that's a huge part of why LOTI is so important. It is worth, though, kicking off fairly early, though, with this question: why does London, why would any area need a LOTI? Well, lots of different ways we could approach that question, but I'll share the one that originally caught my imagination. And this was sort of 10, 12 years ago now, when in a previous life I was working for a think tank, and I was thinking particularly about the role of data and its use by governments, how that could make public services better. And during the course of that research, I stumbled on this map. It's just the map of London boroughs. And you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of a jigsaw puzzle. And kind of the penny dropped for me at the time that at a data level, on almost any given issue, London was like a 33-piece jigsaw puzzle where every organisation has got their little piece, but no one could ever take those pieces, put them together, take a step back and actually see what the big picture shows. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out the flaw in that plan of sort of city governance. When we think of the big issues that affect London, like all other cities, whether it's tackling climate change, flooding, congestion, pollution, cost of living crisis, homelessness, domestic violence, whatever it might be, these issues have no respect for our local authority municipal boundaries. Okay, so if we're to understand those issues, to act upon them, to come up with new solutions, we need to join up that data jigsaw so that we can act together. Data delivers more value when it is shared. Okay, so that was one core thing that I think why London needed LOTI. But you think about the technology part of LOTI's title, well, what do we know about tech? Tech delivers most value when it's scaled. So how do we do that together so it's beyond the scale of just one individual borough? And the I of LOTI, the innovation part, innovation is fundamentally about trying new things, which I hope you'll all agree is more needed now than ever, given the huge pressures on the public sector all around the country. How much better would it be if instead of individual boroughs just testing and trialing their own local experiments, that they actually share what they learn, that they work together on those experiments, that they share their lessons, and in fact, divvy up those experiments so that they're learning faster at reduced risk together. These are three core reasons why LOTI was founded. In fact, our driving question on all things is what can we do better together? And the team and I are always thinking about where is it that we can intervene in a way that through collaboration we make things better, where we add some value. Where are we just getting in the way? And if we're getting in the way, let's back out. That's not what we're there to do. What do we know about where collaboration adds value? Well, to a large extent, we talk about these four key headings, four areas which I think are fairly intuitive, but let me just briefly touch on them. So in the top left there, we've got sharing knowledge, one of the most obvious things that we can try and help with, and any of you working in the public sector will know this. Isn't it mad that each of you should have to try and come up with answers from scratch in isolation? How much better if we can share knowledge about who's learnt what? And the wonderful thing about having a sort of fragmented city like London is that between them, those 33, those 32 plus one boroughs, all of them are further ahead than each other in at least one area. And so if we can find who's got the leading or the best practice on any given topic, we can help share that knowledge around the community. And if within our community we don't have the answer, we can go away and find it out, do the research, find the answers either in the UK or globally, and bring it back to our community. You'll hear later in areas where we've done that on issues like AI, the new thing where people are all wondering what to do. We're sort of going out, finding the answers, bringing them back to our community. Top right there, developing capabilities. All of you in the public sector, I'm sure, will wrestle with the challenge of how do we get the skills, the talent we need to deliver on digital tech, data and innovation matters. We help them think about where they get those skills, how they build their common capability so that we've got what we need across London. Bottom right there, we run projects. It is rare, it is worth emphasising, for us to say every London borough should be involved in the same project. Instead, we tend to work with clusters of boroughs. And again, the advantage of that very diverse community is that there's a cluster of boroughs interested in cybersecurity, a cluster interested in reinventing the front door of adult social care, another cluster interested in the use of Internet of Things for real public outcomes. We help them design those projects, project manage those projects. We help them disseminate the knowledge, write the toolkits so that they can then benefit the whole community beyond just that original cluster. And that's how we get to scale. And then finally, there on the bottom left, influencing change. Sometimes we need to speak with one voice as a London community, and we can do that louder than each individual borough trying to tackle things alone. So we've got good relationships with key figures in central government, with universities, with the tech sector, and beyond, creating those opportunities, those partnerships, so that we can influence change on a wider scale. For all of those areas, when you might ask us, well, how do we pick what type of sort of collaboration model is important? In everything we do, we have an outcomes-driven approach. So not tech-driven, not data-driven, we are outcomes-driven. And every conversation starts with, where are we trying to get to? What is our preferred future? What do we want to be different in the world? Who do we want to be better off because we've got together and done something? We then come back and say, well, where are we now and what obstacles stand in our way? And then and only then can we have a sensible conversation around, okay, what solutions help us go from where we are now to achieve that sort of outcome to reach our destination? Is it a knowledge problem? Is it a capability problem? Is it a lack of action problem? Or is it we need to lobby for help from others? And that sort of drives a huge amount of what we do. What are the benefits of collaboration? Hopefully they're intuitive to lots of you, but We can save money. You see this quote on the right there in blue. Here's one borough just saying in just 2 weeks of joining LOTI, they'd saved around £50,000, literally just by borrowing and reusing what another borough had done, let alone any of the active programs that LOTI runs. According to our evaluation by the GLA economics team, just our work on data sharing, on helping with the information governance of data sharing, saved London local government £1.4 million in the year that was being examined as part of that evaluation. We bring in external funding, at least 2.5 million for things like digital inclusion, 500,000 to date on things like rough sleeping. You'll hear more about those later. We are the place where we're trying to corral those conversations about how we develop the financially sustainable service models that can last well into the future, given the huge service pressures we currently face. You get supported by the team and the community. People are building their networks. We're lobbying together. We're learning faster. And a lot of public sector organisations hide their brilliance under a bushel. Our community is amazing. They are an inspiring bunch to work with. We want to shout loud about their achievements, their work, to help them and to benefit others as well. How has LOTI evolved? We are quite a different beast now from where we started back in July 2019. And I think it's important just to explain the journey that we've been on. Back in 2019, LOTI was founded primarily to serve the needs of chief digital officers in London boroughs. There was a group of them who would have lots of they'd have monthly meetings, they'd discuss issues. Some of them grew frustrated that they were just talking about things, but they didn't have the capability or the capacity to put those ideas into action. And there was an appetite. We need a place for doers, was the rhetoric at the time. And so that original cohort, and inspired by work from the Chief Digital Officer for London, Theo Blackwell, who's now doing some great work within the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, worked with them to originally set up LOTI with that original coalition of the willing. So that small group of chief digital officers wanted us to focus on technology and data issues like sharing how we could procure tech better, how we could join up data better across London, how we could fix things like public sector use of Wi-Fi and quite technical issues. The membership at the time was just 15 London boroughs. The GLA, that's the Greater London Authority, and our host organisation, London Councils. We had a very small team of 3 people. It was just myself, my colleague Genta, who you will hear from in a moment, and our colleague at the time, Onyeka, who was our communications and engagement manager. We had 3 communities of practice for data professionals, trying to help them share knowledge and ideas and resources between themselves. And we did about 20 events and workshops during the course of that initial year to uncover what they wanted to try and push ideas forward. This was that pioneering group of 15. Looks a little bit like a dragon, but the ones who took a really bold leap of faith and said, we're not quite sure what LOTI will be yet, but we're up for collaboration. We believe in that power of collaboration. Fast forward to today, our community has gone from sort of 17 key representatives from our member organisations to now a community of more than 1,500 digital technology, data and innovation colleagues, plus a whole range of different colleagues working on core London services like adult social care, net zero, housing and more. We've gone from that narrow focus on tech and data to thinking about people, about technology, about data, about the full suite of innovation methods, and taking them and not just fixing the plumbing behind the scenes, but putting them at the service of our colleagues working on big themes, whether it's homelessness, climate change, social care reform, and beyond. Hopefully, we're doing something right because we've gone from 15 boroughs up to 28. We've gone from a team of 3 to still small, just 10 of us working in LOTI. We've now got 10 communities of practice where colleagues right across the boroughs are sharing ideas, problems, challenges, case studies, best practice. And this figure still blows my mind, and why the team often look exhausted each Friday when we have our sort of roundup meeting. We do 100 events now, from 20-person workshops to big conferences for 150 people every year. So the level of activity, let alone projects, has really, really accelerated. This is the community today. It is my sincere wish that we will eventually turn the whole of London in the bright and sparkly LOTI pink. We'll get there. What is it that we actually work on then? We've gone on that journey. We've gone from that narrow focus, that small community, to this broader sphere. LOTI essentially today works in two ways. The first way is concerns these four colourful boxes at the top there, the people, the tech, the data, and the innovation methods. And that core community of the chief digital officers, who are still the main representatives from each borough within LOTI, these are the things that they want us to be working on, helping them be high performing organisations by looking at the people question. Where do they access talent? How do they recruit better? How do they use apprenticeships? How do they upskill their own staff with the knowledge and skills that they need? We look at partnerships, talking to universities, to innovation organisations like Nesta and the Bloomberg Philanthropies, so that boroughs can look at us as being their doorway to some of the most exciting organisations who often come with funding, knowledge, and expertise where they would struggle to broker those relationships individually. We work on innovation culture as well. We'll be doing lots of leadership sessions with borough leadership teams, helping them understand how do they create the conditions in which their digital tech data innovation, and in fact every colleague, can solve the blindingly obvious problem right in front of them. That's of continuous innovation, continuous improvement culture. And on knowledge and skills, I've mentioned we've got those 10 communities of practice. And if you skip over to the LOTI website and check out our resources page, so loti.london, click on the resources page, we've got a library now of dozens of toolkits, guides, templates. With the exception of cybersecurity, every piece of LOTI work is done in the open. We share it not just for our community, but for anyone to benefit from. And it's always gratifying to get emails from around the country, around London, and indeed globally from people who have found some of those resources useful. On technology, we do everything from the shiny new stuff, looking at emerging tech like AI and digital twins, which you'll hear more about from my colleague Sam in just a moment. We look at cybersecurity. For obvious reasons, that's something we don't publicize widely. But one initiative I can share is that given local authorities work with hundreds of different providers to power their services, we help test the cyber resilience of the major suppliers to London local government once, so that our boroughs don't have to do that individually. Much more cost effective and enables those collaborative knowledge sharing conversations. On Build and Buy Better, we're looking at those legacy tools, the different applications that power the 500 plus public services that your average borough runs. If you're a LOTI member, you have great insight into which other technologies are used by your peers to have better conversations about the best suppliers and tools out there. And on smart cities, again, we've had a lot of talk over the last few decades on smart cities. The last couple of years, there's been some great practical projects happening in London. My colleague Jay will tell you about one that we're really passionate about. It's the use of technology like Internet of Things out there in parks, in streets, in public housing, to be able to capture data and drive better outcomes. On data, this bottom left box here, I think the biggest story, and again, you're going to hear more about this, is before LOTI was set up. You remember that data jigsaw I was telling you about? Before LOTI was set up, to just do the information governance work, the legal paperwork to agree to share data between all 32 boroughs in the City of London, that alone would typically take 2 years. And often projects just didn't happen at all because people assumed it wouldn't be possible because of some sort of data protection constraint. We're now able to do that in a much more enabling way, and we can do it in weeks, or certainly a handful of months rather than 2 years, radically accelerated. You're going to hear how in just a moment. And finally, in terms of these sort of fixing the plumbing boxes, the innovation methods, this yellow one here, one thing we are evangelical about, and one thing where I think the LOTI view is maybe a little bit different from some of the rhetoric we hear from parts of central government and other parts of the country. We are strong believers you cannot just talk about technology, technology systems, technology platforms in a vacuum. You have to include thinking about the broad suite of innovation methods, our ways of working, our approaches, our team cultures. Let's use the full 21st century toolkit, including behavioral science, design thinking, open innovation, research and foresight. So we're not just taking shiny new tech, bolting it onto the same ways of working we've had for the last 20 years and expecting profound change to happen. It's a more holistic approach. We've learned that this is the only way that we can get really profound change done. And finally here on this slide, you notice that in the last couple of years, we've taken that work, we've done a lot of behind the scenes fixing the plumbing style work, and are now bringing it to bear, saying, we've got this incredible set of tools and methods, an incredible community. Let us now help our colleagues leading the way on issues like net zero, housing, social care, and digital inclusion. Let's make sure they are fully armed up, equipped to tackle some of these big, big issues that are affecting our city, like many other cities as well. All of this, one key lesson learned, and I've seen this the hard way over previous jobs, is that around the country, I've seen pilots and great initiatives and great collaboratives where it's always dependent on someone finding a few minutes a day to do it on top of their day job. I think the LOTI model, one of the key lessons we can share already is that it has to be someone's full-time job to make collaboration happen. My team are extraordinary, incredibly high performing and productive. It is an enormous amount of work to bring these projects to life, to have the conversations, to bring them to fruition. And so for those of you thinking about your area, really making sure you're thinking about the team that can deliver on these aspirations. Because this is what we see. Without a LOTI type entity, maybe some of you have felt this yourselves from your own projects. Tends to be quite ad hoc, it's temporary and normally falls off when the grant funding runs out. It's very dependent on who knows who. It can feel super high friction and often really stressful. And our job is to make it deliberate, sustained, systematic, low friction, and actually most of all fun. We were discussing this in a team meeting yesterday, and that there's no excuse, despite the seriousness of the task that we all come to work with in the public sector, it can still be fun. And on collaboration, we can't just sell this at an intellectual level, like this is intuitively a good thing. You've got to make it feel good so people want to turn up, they want to participate, and they feel really, really positive about doing that. This is the extraordinary LOTI team. Absolute privilege to be able to work with these 9 individuals. You can see from their job titles kind of the blend of different skills we've got, ranging from service design to working on data project management, digital innovation expertise, taking those digital ideas and innovation in its broadest sense and putting that into action, skills and talent, smart cities and cybersecurity. You'll see the communications and engagement manager role, vital. A lot of people have turned up today because of effective promotion. A lot of people say we look much bigger than a 10-person team, and that's thanks to the work that Polly does on communications and engagement. We've got that administrator role, Esther, who keeps us being a very well-oiled machine, as well as being able to advise on data ethics and on the information governance side of things. And you're going to be hearing from colleagues across this screen a little bit later on, and they're available to answer your questions. Before we get into the actual substance, I know the most interesting bit you want to know about is like, what are we working on? Let's give you those examples. Finally, let's just go through the bits about the funding, the governance, and the power of that brand. How will we fund it? Well, the core funding comes from our members. The boroughs each pay £33,000 a year. The GLA pays £100,000 a year. London Councils pays £100,000 a year. That gives us an annual membership income of more or less £1 million a year. We have some co-funded roles. Our information governance lead, Victoria, is funded or co-funded by the Met Police and the Mayor's Office of Policing and Crime because they feel that benefit and that need for data sharing across the public sector. And we'll next month we have a new role joining the team, a net zero data lead. And that is being funded by our colleagues at the GLA. We've also had some specific funding for particular specific projects where we've been seen as the delivery vehicle for getting it done. We're very grateful to the Mayor of London for giving us about £2.5 million to work on Get Online London, our digital inclusion service. And we've had £500,000 from GLA, MHCLG and borough housing officers to work on a data platform to understand rough sleeping. Still, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small budget, but we can still get a huge amount done. Our average budget over the last few years, with all of these additional funds, has averaged out being just above £2 million a year. Governance-wise, we are hosted by this organisation called London Councils, which represents all the London boroughs in the City of London. Our formal governance is their formal governance. So they have an executive committee and a leaders committee made up of politicians from across the London boroughs. We submit our results, our papers to them, and they're the ones who are sort of formally checking on us. But I also believe in governance in practice, like practically what really is keeping us accountable at a really day-to-day level. Fundamentally, it's important to say boroughs have no contractual obligation to stay part of LOTI whatsoever. Literally, we send them a request to pay their annual membership fee. If they pay it, we take it as a good sign we're doing the right thing. If they stop, we're in serious trouble. So that really holds us accountable to responding to their needs. And to make sure we're accountable, we have those 100 events a year, as I said. But key to those are every month we meet with the main representatives of each borough, which tends to be their chief digital officer, where we're constantly sharing our work plan, getting their feedback, and checking that they're happy. Um, we're also very, very fortunate to have some champions at a very senior level. Tony Clements, who's the Chief Exec of Ealing Council, Alex Dewsnap, who's the Managing Director of Harrow Council, are the SELC leads for innovation. SELC is the group of all the London Borough Chief Execs who get together to discuss London's big issues. We're also very privileged to have Mayor Roxana Fiaz, who is the Mayor of Newham, and she is the political lead for data and innovation. And they have been hugely, hugely supportive at making sure LOTI's agenda is now getting that senior leadership and political attention. And finally, just on these contextual background, how we work kind of topics, the comms, the brand, and the engagement side of things have been hugely, hugely important in a way that perhaps wasn't intuitive right from day one. LOTI very deliberately designs itself to be friendly and accessible, and our look and feel, we hope, doesn't feel a lot like what you'd expect normally from local government. It's meant to feel fun, engaging, attractive, to capture attention. The external comms, many of you are joining this call, presumably have found us one way or another through these. We've got the website at loti.london. We're active on LinkedIn and X, and we have a monthly newsletter. If you haven't yet joined the monthly newsletter, I dare say we can pop that in the chat to subscribe. You'll find it on our website on every page, and there's also a QR code at the end of this deck. Internally, we've got this big community of 1,500 people. We use a platform called Basecamp to stay actively in communication with them. It enables us to set up separate spaces for different communities of practice, different projects, so we can have those ring-fence conversations. We do a weekly digest email to our members summarizing the huge range of stuff they can get involved with. And as we've said, more than 100 events and workshops each year. And the partnerships are powerful, as I said, trying to make sure that we're reaching out, developing those relationships with the private sector, public sector, and indeed third sector, offering those great opportunities, those great door openers to organisations that can maximise our work. So, folks, let us now turn to some of our example projects to give you a flavour of practically what kinds of stuff is LOTI actually bringing to life. Final slide where you'll be hearing from me on people is we are actively helping boroughs very practically on their recruitment needs. So we work with some brilliant headhunters who've got knowledge of what all the boroughs are thinking and wanting and needing to hire. We negotiate discounted rates with them so that we can help boroughs hire much more effectively. On the LOTI website, we have a jobs board. We're mining all of our boroughs' websites for their latest digital tech, data and innovation roles every week, and we do promotion of those on their behalf. And on the right there, you'll see that we do a lot of training as well. Between the team, we've got a lot of knowledge in different areas. We bring in external trainers as well in a way that's much more cost effective than if each borough tried to seek that alone. Lots more we could say on people, but for now, let me hand over to my colleague Sam, who's going to talk about some of our work on technology. Sam, over to you.
Thanks, Eddie. Hi, everyone. I'll quickly talk through how LOTI supports our members in their ambitions to use AI. We've broken it down into sort of 4 threads, really trying to focus on what are the things that boroughs need to be more effective users of AI. So as Eddie said, we're not sort of tech-led, we're very much led by how do the organizations function, how are the people in there, what are they doing, what can we do to support them better. So the first one being identifying opportunities. We know that there's so much excitement and hype and energy around AI, so it's what are the things that we should be working on when it comes to AI, and finding those things and sharing those good opportunities collectively. The second being building versus buying is a big conversation. When should we be building something? When should we be buying something? How do we do these things better? these are very much questions still up in the air, but we really try and actively convene conversations around particular use cases or bits of technology so we can sort of more collectively develop a mature answer to these questions. When it comes to the actual practice of adoption, once we maybe have built or developed something, we have communities of practice. We have a Gen AI adoption working group where we think about how can we actually design services in the right way? How do we support staff to actually use some of these tools effectively? We know the tools can be good, but if people don't use them well, then maybe they're not delivering the value that we need of them. And lastly, and really importantly for us, is using it responsibly. So how do we govern, if we're using AI, how do we govern it effectively in a way that's sort of worthy of our residents' trust? And that can be through a lot of the work that my great colleague Victoria does around information governance, or it's questions around some of the ethics stuff when I've got my hat on for that as well. If we go to the next slide, Eddie, I've got an example here. I guess when it works well, this is kind of what it looks like as an innovation pipeline. And we've sort of framed it in the context of the AI Opportunities Action Plan, talking about scan, pilot, scale. On the first action, I suppose, is the scanning. So we worked with faculty last year to co-develop with 3 councils some opportunities in housing services and also separately in adult social care. These were thematic areas proposed to us by our members. So we listening to them the whole time, involving them in the research, and we developed and fleshed out what these opportunities might be with faculty. Off the back of that, Islington, who are one of the participant councils, decided they really liked one of our sort of high priority opportunities, and then they've gone and developed a chatbot in WhatsApp for residents to help manage and book housing repairs. They've done that piloting internally, and then the scaling, this is where LOTI comes back in. We host regular networks and groups, so Islington have shared different levels of information, from a strategy level with CIOs to technical information to business cases, adoption frameworks, all these kind of bits, some of the ethics questions they've solved. They're able to come back to our communities in LOTI and share those things and enable that sort of scaling then, so other boroughs can then go away and implement those solutions. So that's kind of it all working well in practice. It doesn't always look so neat and tidy like that, but I think that sort of hopefully highlights how that collaborative innovation model can work really effectively. Over to you, Eddie.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. And as I said, there's so much more we could talk about on any of these topics. You'll see some links in the chat to Sam's recent AI work. Again, if you've got questions on that, we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer them. Data. I mentioned data being one of those original driving forces of why LOTI was set up. And to tell you more about that, let me hand over to my colleague, Jay.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so the work we've done on rough sleeping is really illustrative of some of the type of data collaboration projects we like to get involved in. Rough sleeping is an area which has similarities to other areas or service areas in local government, where people move through the system, touch many different services that are operated by either other local authorities, other public bodies or charities. And yet it's one of those areas where if we don't fully understand how people are moving through that system, we aren't able to collaborate in changing that system, then we'll never really get to the nub of that problem and be able to change things for the better. So in rough sleeping, we've brought together partners from the 33 London boroughs, from the GLA, and from charities who work in this space, like accommodation providers like St Mungo's, to share data in an area where ultimately, when we first engaged on the issue, we were told that it would be impossible because the information governance would be too difficult. What we've been able to achieve through this collaboration is to test out some of our data collaboration methodologies in practice, our IG processes in practices, and our outcomes focused methodologies in practice, and actually be able to do something which we were told would be impossible, which is to bring data at this scale together to really drive a new set of insights that helps us to understand what's happening in rough sleeping across all of London. We've worked in a very iterative way. So we started with a pilot group of 4 boroughs and a small number of service providers to build a sense of trust and to start with a small enough scale that would actually make the project viable. We went through our information governance processes, and we were able to go live with data moving within, I'd say, about 6 to 8 weeks of starting off the information governance work. And now, as I said, we've got all of the boroughs sharing data as part of this initiative. And we're now in a much better position to understand what a kind of bigger and more ambitious data capability to address a kind of broader lens of homelessness would look like in the future. And do you want to introduce the one, Eddie, or I can jump straight in?
Go straight for it.
Another area to tell you about it in the data domain, it sits, I suppose, also in the smart city space. So this project has been looking at damp and mold, and it's an area which has really come into focus following the tragic coroner's decision attributing the death of Abu Kikshak to mold in his home. This is an area where housing directors are really trying to get on top of damp and mold, but there is a very complicated and diverse and large number of London's housing stock to try to understand the work that we've done in this space has been driven by us with the GLA and has brought 20 boroughs into the mix. 16 of those boroughs have installed sensors with our support, and a further 4 have worked with us to share insights and collaborate on how exactly we should deploy sensors and what good practice looks like when using this new technology to address damp and mold. What's been really successful about this is that having that scale and being able to operate with that number of partners has allowed us to test out a number of different methodologies to deployment and actually learn what works in different contexts. We've also been able to deliver both operational benefits and insights for individual boroughs delivering within their organisations, but being able to put the infrastructure together to start testing out the data infrastructure that might be needed or that is needed for bringing data together at a London level, and so that we can start thinking about assessing damp and mold risk across stock right across the city, which gives us a larger data set that enables us to do a different type of analytics, but also helps us to understand risk at that London or regional level, and helps us to drive further insights, which can then be used to address housing stock and ultimately lead, or hopefully lead, to improved outcomes for residents living in those homes.
It's been great to see that, an example of a smart city project really purposefully going out to tackle one of the big issues affecting London boroughs. Thank you for that, Jay. Underpinning all of this data work, whether existing data sets or IoT-enabled data sets, is our work on information governance, for which let me hand over to my colleague Victoria.
Hello, everyone. As the Pan-London Information Governance Lead at LOTI, my job is to support collaboration and also support my fellow information governance professionals across the boroughs and in other agencies, helping to ensure that the innovation work we do is compliant with data protection. I work on data sharing agreements and projects across the entire span of local authority responsibilities, and quite often the responsibilities of police force as well. So I work on domestic abuse, damp and mold, rough sleeping, as you just heard about, child vaccinations, child wellbeing and prevention, whole range there. As Eddie said, the 1.4 million savings we made, a lot of that was achieved through the reduction in the number of data sharing agreements that had to be in place. For example, the Met Police needed 32 agreements, one with each borough for every subject area. And that's why they were taking between 2 and 10 years in the case of one of them. So what my job helps to do, and the Pan-London approach that we take, means we save a lot of time. We don't have to have the same officers in every borough doing the same research over and over. And having me as a dedicated resource means that I can do deep dives for added value that the borough's officers just don't have time for with their stretched resource. So as Jay said, we know the rough sleeping project would not have worked without the information governance being there and being strong. So in part of my role, knowing that some of the smaller charities don't have access to continual data protection officer support, I wrote the guidance for them as well specifically, so they could feel more confident in taking part. And the links that have been put in the chat to the Rough Sleeping Project and the Damp and Mold Project include access to the information governance resources that I developed for those projects. So you'll be able to look at those. One of the big things about the project is the continuity. We're using the same template, really makes it easy for people to work with, and it really builds trust and participation. We know for one particular project that having the good information governance increased participation, and participation increased the amount of funding that was coming from central government to the project. I'm really keen that people understand that good information governance is necessary for innovation. So I will drop in the chat the link to my recent blog on that subject that you can take a look through. Part of my role is to act as a touch point, and that's a really important one. So I'm often the first port of call for people who wish to use local government data or drive or take part in local government data projects. And as Eddie said about somebody needing to be responsible for the collaboration, you do need a person in post whose job it is to lead or facilitate. I know from experience that doing that on top of your day job is extremely difficult. Also, when the role was created, we didn't realize how much national influence I'd be able to have. So I've acted as a subject matter expert to shape national approaches to benefit London local government, worked with the LGA, central government departments, the regulator, the ICO in some cases. I think in a sea of agencies and organizations working together, sometimes it needs one person to plant a flag and start doing something. We have an example of that with the work I did on the telephony network digital switchover that's taking place in the UK at the moment. So working in a working group for that subject area, but I wrote the national template for data sharing the data sharing agreement between the telephony companies and the local authorities. And this was sharing data to protect vulnerable adults who use telecare devices that are impacted by the digital switchover. That last point there, and Eddie's already mentioned about the training that we can help support. So I can identify gaps in knowledge in IG officers, but also in other areas. So I can source some training, or one particular that we are kicking off after a successful pilot is a workshop on data protection and GDPR for data analysts and data project leads. So this is a full day event where I take them through, in a hopefully fun way at times, all of the information governance, data protection impacts on the work of a data analyst and for data projects. The pilot went extremely well, so I'm looking forward to doing more of those sessions. What I will also pop in the chat for you is a link through to the new IG hub on the LOTI website. There's some resources there already, and we'll be building up extra resources there as we go through. So at the moment, you can find there a procedure for how to incorporate data protection and information governance into system or process testing, or how to undertake an information governance review of a project, which we found really helps, as I said, with funders or getting people to trust the project and get on board with it, both from a perspective of organizations getting on board, but also individuals like young people at risk of serious crime for one particular project that we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Those links, I think, are already pre-populated in the chat, so thank you, colleagues, for posting those for those who are interested to dive in more detail. Now, though, on an innovation front and big public service transformation pieces, let me hand over to my colleague, Genta.
Hello, everyone. Digital inclusion is one of those topic areas that we started getting involved in during the pandemic, and with the funding and support from the Mayor of London, we were able to do a number of things. We were able to undertake research and to better understand the nature of digital exclusion that Londoners were facing. We were also able to pilot kind of different projects to address some of those needs. But more importantly, what that helped us do was to understand what was missing. What was that big kind of high impact program or project that we as a city needed to put in place to address the huge the huge range of needs of our residents. And that led us to the creation of Get Online London, which is London's digital inclusion service that offers a holistic package of support that includes things like digital devices, laptops, tablets, etc., mobile data, skills, and skills for residents across every single corner of London. But, what was crucial about this was the involvement of our community in the creation and the development and shaping of this approach. Get Online London is funded again by the Mayor of London, delivered by ourselves and Good Things Foundation, which is a national charity, that digital inclusion charity. But what's really special, I think, about this service, and actually quite unique, is that the service goes to people. It goes to Londoners where they are in their neighbourhoods, being deeply rooted in the kind of needs of communities. And the other thing that we've noticed is that Londoners who wouldn't otherwise engage with perhaps government or council services are really engaging and benefiting from this type of support. Next slide, please. The other unique feature about Get Online London is that it takes a strength-based approach, and what that means is that it brings the best and makes use of what's already out there. Looking at bringing together existing provision and supporting local and voluntary and community sector organisations who already deliver a range of support. As you can see on this slide, they don't just focus on providing digital inclusion support. They help Londoners with a range of needs, and digital inclusion is almost a bolt-on, an additional support service that's provided as a result of this. And finally, it's a nationally and internationally recognised programme, and we believe it's the only European programme of its type and also scale. I think this was everything on digital inclusion and Get Online London.
So moving on then to one of our very exciting recent experiments, the LOTI Sandbox.
So the Local Authority Sandbox is a very, very exciting initiative that we've been working on. Essentially, it's a physical space where the public, private sector organisations, as well as academia, can come together to test new ideas for service models. They can also test new technologies, new data products without worrying about messing up the actual live services. This is a very low risk approach because it gives the opportunity to try these potentially completely radical new ways of doing things and see what would work and possibly what wouldn't work in the real world before mass implementation and actually rolling things out to the public. We ran this Local Authority Sandbox. We applied it to adult social care for obvious reasons. I think next slide, please, Eddie. Obviously, we're all familiar with huge financial and demand pressures in this service. What we did here was to undertake a lot of primary and user research with frontline practitioners in the boroughs, in the NHS, across other health organisations. But we also looked at kind of bringing those insights together to help us map what this kind of really complex system looks like. And the result of that work was the system map that you can see here on the screen. Next slide, please. In addition to this research and these insights actually helped us to also identify some typical journeys of individuals going through the whole system. So looking beyond the individual kind of silos of specific organisations involved in that health and care system map. So and that led us to the creation of these personas, one of which you can see here on the screen. It's Alicia and her husband, Ibrahim, diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. Next slides, please. So all this preliminary work, we took forward in a three-phased approach that you can see here on the slide that helped us actually go from problem, an idea, all the way to developing and creating 6 tangible prototypes. So as part of this process, we ran an immersive event that brought together stakeholders from the public, private sector organizations, as well as academia and other thinkers in this space, to firstly look at the challenges, to align on those challenges across the sector. We know that a lot of work has been done within the siloed kind of organizations part of the system, but we wanted to get that broad view of problems or systemic problems. We then used live for the first time. We used live acting performances to bring to life the personas, to bring to life the daily problems that these people are experiencing as they go through that system. And then with that same group, which included innovators and suppliers, we looked at, what were those nuggets of ideas for opportunities. And then the second thing was to take those nuggets of ideas for opportunities, put them through a proper design sprint process, to then, which led us to the creation of the 6 prototypes I mentioned before. And then the last bit of the process was about showcasing these solutions to our local government colleagues, to the suppliers, to the rest of the system, including the NHS and healthcare organizations. Next slide, please. I think I just want to say in summary that this approach is something, the methodology and the kind of the tools we used here are very appropriate for tackling big system citywide challenges. In this case, it's adult social care, but it could be climate change, housing, all the other big city pressures we all know about. The other feature cool thing about this process was just that creativity, using acting performances, just kind of thinking differently about the problem in a way that I think it is more of a 4D experience as opposed to a 2D reading a document about the needs of a persona. And then the other thing was about creating a safe space and a separate space. We are often told by our borough colleagues that actually it's very difficult for them to step out of their daily firefighting mode, to then think creatively and holistically about solutions to the problems that they are facing day in, day out. And I think the huge overwhelming feedback we received with this was that this separate space, separating the day-to-day from kind of this different way of thinking is so necessary and so helpful. We have a video that we're planning that goes through this step by step through this methodology, and of course we will share that with you. There are lots of resources, blogs, and toolkits we've developed about this process, and again I think they're being shared in the chat, but we can share with you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Gente, and thank you to our colleague Anjali also on the call, the two of them really driving this really ambitious process. And as Gente says, something we really hope to apply to many more issues coming up. Final section from us, folks, just briefly some lessons learned, and then we're really keen to hear your questions. If you've got questions that have been emerging, I can see already some appearing in the chat. Feel free to drop them there. We'll come to those. You'll also have the chance to raise your hand if you prefer to do it that way. But a few reflections on some lessons learned from the LOTI experience to date. Number one is to focus on the coalition of the willing. If you are thinking about setting up a sort of collaborative entity like LOTI in your region, the single best way you could kill it is to insist that every single organization has to be part of it. We playfully joke at LOTI that we're sort of professional cat herders. We love our cats. We mean that in a very positive way. It only works if the cats want to be herded in principle. If people are sitting in the room going, well, this will never work, not interested, that negative energy, I think, would really kill it. So the community we work with, these 1,500 people across 28 boroughs, GLA and London councils, an extraordinary set of people who are generously giving of their time as much as they are taking from the community. And that is the only way it works. We try and create a sense of FOMO. so that people who haven't joined originally want to then join. As I said, we've gone from 15 to 28, and I think if we'd started with everyone, we'd have fizzled out a long time ago. Second bit is that you've got to listen to your members, but then pick your project strategically. This was my mistake when we first set up LOTI. I tried rather naively to run it like an open democracy, where we said anybody suggest an idea, we'll literally do sticky dot voting, and we'll just run with the most popular ones. Kind of, you end up with the popular ideas, but they were strategically completely incoherent. Instead, we started going, okay, let us listen. And through those 100 events, hundreds of meetings every year with our members, we're constantly absorbing, but then we reflect on it. We think about where collaboration adds value. We then play back a really specific proposal to our community and say, how about this? And then we find the smaller coalition of the willing who wants to run with that. That enables us to be far more strategic. We also learn after some time, this took me a little while for the penny to drop, but my team and I think about pan-London, or we think in a pan-London terms all day, every day. Many of our borough members are obviously rightly focused on their local area. We can sometimes spot opportunities they can't, and therefore having an honest dialogue and that constant listening, adapting constantly to their needs has been vital. Another way we sometimes talk about LOTI is that our challenge is to be an open buffet. You know, we have to offer enough of interest to enough members enough of the time to keep them feeling like they're getting that value from being part of the community. But the fact we can evolve really organically and very rapidly to their needs has been really important. Related to that is trust. I cannot emphasize enough how much it takes time, but over the course of 5.5, almost 6 years now, we've been able to build trust with our members, because often with the team, I share this kind of diagram. There's what our members want and what they are asking us to do. We don't just sort of slavishly follow what we are sort of asked of. Instead, we're saying, okay, we're hearing you. Yes, we will do those things, but also here's some opportunities that we believe in. We think this is the right thing to do. Let's try and pull you, in some cases, slightly out of your comfort zone. And it's trying to get the trust in order to be able to do those more ambitious things. The work that Genta just described there on adult social care, none of our members asked us to do radical service design in adult social care. However, what we saw was that it wasn't working just having chief digital officers talking about which IT systems were working and which ones weren't, when we needed to look at the service model itself and then discuss what tech and data can enable that new way of working. We can do that now because of trust. It takes time, but that's a core part of the mission of any such team. You've got to agree a common set of rules of engagement. As I said, LOTI, there's no contractual relationship between the boroughs and us. It's purely, do they pay their invoices each year for their membership? Again, we'll share these slides. Don't try and note this all down, albeit we can share the link which has all of this, our membership charter. When any borough joins, they literally approve saying, we promise to adhere to the following ways of engagement, trying to make sure that they're giving, that are not just taking, that they're encouraging people to be ambitious. And what they won't do, they're not just going to focus on pet projects. They recognize they've got to contribute. We're not going to behave like an exclusive club, etc. And so just having that sort of MOU style document has been really helpful for us. We work in the open, and again, I know this is kind of a common principle for those of you working in the digital world. I think it's absolutely vital. Again, if you haven't checked it out already, our resources page on the LOTI website, every toolkit, template guide we publish openly. We realize that's benefiting local authorities all around the country and beyond. We get amazing feedback by working in the open. And that's one of the most powerful reasons we do it. We also blog very regularly on these topics. So if any of that can help you, please do engage, encourage many others to do the same. And make it fun. As we said, collaboration is hard, but deeply worth it. Our workshops inject fun, humor, and sort of energy into them so that they don't feel like dry conversations. And in part, that's just to make it feel good. It is also to shift people into a different mental gear whereby they feel able to be more creative. Rest assured, the bricks we have there, LOTI literally owns a pack of plastic bricks. You can chuck them without injuring anyone severely, but we use them to talk about, a strengths-based approach. What have we got? What can we build on? And again, it just helps people gather around a problem in a different way. One of our favorite ones, top tip, if you take nothing away from this webinar, but this, if you think you're going to face a skeptical audience, we have bought the most depressing, ragged-looking tree you can find. I think it was on the John Lewis website in the end. It's a sad-looking thing, but at the start of a workshop, we'll sometimes get people to add a tag onto the branches of all the reasons why they think the thing we're about to discuss will never work. And by doing that, it hopefully just releases people into a different mental space where they're able to engage positively in a sort of ideation discussion. So thoroughly recommend all of those. And finally, I think evaluations. This is something we actually need to get even stronger at, but we were delighted that back in late 2003, the GLA's economic team evaluated us. We can link to that document. LOTI saves time. It improves collaboration, and the feedback we receive has been incredibly positive to date. We are never complacent about that. We are certainly not perfect, but I think we feel we've got a lot to be proud of to date. Finally then, folks, if any of what we have said has been interesting to you and you are not yet subscribed, really recommend you getting involved on LOTI's monthly newsletter, the curated highlights of all the different projects, thought leadership, guest blogs that we publish. And again, I think we can probably share a subscribe link in the chat to that if you don't have time to grab this. As I said, we will